Chaplain Johnson III, chaplain here at Christian Hospital Northeast in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm glad to be able to share these messages of encouragement and inspiration with you, and I hope that they might find a home with you as you journey along your way. As you begin your week, and perhaps as you journey on beyond this week, I hope these words meet you along the way. Maybe, perhaps not immediately, but maybe over time, you might find encouragement and inspiration in them. Today's morning meditation is entitled Knowing When. Knowing When. I'm convinced so many of us and many people that I come in contact with are right in between places. They are in that place of decision. They have to make decisions and are not quite sure which ones would be the right ones. They may be making decisions about life or death, about family and loved ones, about their career, perhaps, or even their own health. They may be in the place where they're trying to decide what college to send their children to, or where they should go for their medical treatment, or whether or not they should undertake chemotherapy, or whether they should refrain from it and try to make the most out of the life that they believe they have left. Many people are in between and making hard decisions in the most crucial and most difficult circumstances. And so that we are aware about how to make those decisions. And it's not so much about what you have to choose, but when you would choose it. And so I want to talk about knowing when, knowing when. And I was thinking the other day as I was going through a process of sharing this message about how do we discover when is the right time? And so that knowing when is important for all of us. Kenny Rogers, back in 1978, offered to the world this wonderful song called "The Gambler." It hit the chart high on the charts, number one on the charts. Won a Grammy even for this song in 1978, and it was one of those songs that sticks with you. The hook stays with you. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. You never count your money while you're sitting at the table. There'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done. Kenny Rogers reminded us that knowing when is important. And he tells this story about a gambler he meets on a train, who both of them are by chance in the same space trying to figure out what life is. The gambler says to him, I've learned how to read people's faces, know what cards they're holding in their hands by the look in their eyes. And sometimes I can tell what they need to do or what they should do based on by the face that they're holding. So they are not quite sure what to do and they don't know when and where. And sometimes life can be so difficult, many people are struggling between when they should make these decisions, where they should make these decisions. So I want to talk with you for a few moments about knowing when. How do you know when to start or when to go or when to end a relationship or when to start one? How do you know when to follow your dreams or to chase after an ambition that has been before you or in your heart your whole life or on your mind or in your spirit? How do you know when to cut off relatives or stop people from taking advantage of you or find yourself in a place where you realize that what you're doing is not healthy for your soul or for your mind or for your spirit? I mean, really, how do you know when? How do you know when? If we are not aware of how much time we have on earth, how far do we go? How much do we do? How much time do we waste? How do we know when? Well, I think there's some clues to that. And the gambler in the song does not really indicate when, it just says you have to know. Well, how do we know? How do we ever get a sense of what is right or wrong, good or bad, or what is perfect for the moment, or what could be a disaster in our lives in our future? Well, I think I might be able to kind of chase this down, if you don't mind going with me on a journey, and perhaps we can come up with it by the end of this message. I think we discover when, not necessarily by when our minds tell us. Our minds indicate that we've thought the thing through, that we have spent some time kind of looking at things through all the angles. We have tried our best to try to figure out the best we could. Cognitively, we have put the pieces together. We've laid the puzzle out on the table, and we've discovered that we're not still quite sure when things are happening or should happen, because they're contingent on other things. And as much as our minds can try to figure out things, sometimes our minds get us in more trouble than anything. I heard someone say that, if you're not quite sure that you're overthinking things, then you're probably overthinking things. And many of us find ourselves victim to overthinking. We think one way, and then we think about the thought that we thought about the thing that we were thinking about. And before we know it, we have turned ourselves in circles, dizzying ourselves with worry, and not really concretely landing on anything that would make sense for us to make a choice, so that we find ourselves overthinking or thinking ourselves into a corner. In other words, we find ourselves not necessarily knowing when by the way we think, or by knowing with our heads. Knowing with our heads means that we're trying to know it, and knowing when with our heads can lead us into a place where we have regrets. So I don't know if knowing with our heads is the best way to go. But maybe perhaps knowing with our hands can help. Many people have to live by experience. And our experience tells us that this thing is good or this thing is bad. And knowing when means that we have had the practice, the routine, we've invested ourselves enough in what it is that we're doing that we have found a way to have a rhythm of doing it because we've had experience that has taught us. Now, mind you, I said maybe not but with our head, but I want to say something about with our heads and our hands, that you cannot exhaust where you've been unless you have traveled the road of thinking things through and working things through. Sometimes people who don't think things through and don't work things through take the shortcut and just disregard all of the things that are necessary when they're making choices in life. They roll the dice and just go with it. And in those moments, you're not quite sure. So going with and knowing with our heads may not get us all the way there, but it's good to try to think things through a little bit. And knowing with our hands is important because we get the experience of putting our hands in the soil, or the experience of cleaning what it feels like to have our hands grow tired, or as a painter with paint, to know what it means to hold a brush at a certain angle for a number of minutes and hours. It is important to know also with our experience, but our experience doesn't tell us about everything, because my experience may not equal your experience. And so I can't know what you know, and you can't know what I know. And so that knowledge and knowing when does not automatically come with experience with our hands. Well, what else is there? Knowing not only with our heads and knowing with our hands, but maybe perhaps, and I like this one more than any, even though it is not exhaustive, I believe it is important to know with your heart. But what do you mean? I'm not meaning with your heart by meaning with your feelings. I'm meaning knowing with your heart means to know with your soul. That your soul knows what you're doing and why you're doing it, because it is because it is what you've been created for. It means that I'm here because my soul has called me here. My soul has caught up with me and says, this is the place that you should be. These are the things that you should do. And so I guess when the gambler is saying to young Kenny Rogers, who is singing the song, saying you have to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run, he's not talking simply about a card game or gambling. He's talking about something else. So let me share these words to the song in its completion so you can get it. He says, on a warm summer's evening, on a train bound for nowhere, I met up with a gambler. We both were too tired to sleep. So we took turns of staring. out the window at the darkness. The boredom overtook us, and he began to speak. He said, "Son, I've made a life out of reading people's faces, knowing what the cards were by the way they held their eyes. So if you don't mind saying, I can see you're out of aces. For a taste of your whiskey, I'll give you some advice." So I handed him the bottle, and he drank down my last swallow. And then he bummed a cigarette and asked me for a light. And the night got deathly quiet, and his face lost all expression. Said, "If you're gonna play the game, boy, you gotta learn to play it right. You got to know when to hold 'em and know when to fold 'em. Know when to walk away and know when to run. You never count your money when you're sitting at the table. There'd be time enough for counting when the dealing's done. Every gambler knows that the secret to surviving is knowing what to throw away and knowing what to keep. Because every hand's a winner and every hand's a loser. And the best that you can hope for is to die in your sleep." And when he'd finished speaking, he turned back toward the window, crushed out his cigarette, faded off to sleep. And somewhere in the darkness, the gambler, he broke even. But in his final words, I found an ace that I could keep. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. You never count your money while you're sitting at the table. There'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done. I love that song. And my imaginings are these, that sometimes in this game of life, and it is sometimes a game, but it's real and it's dangerous and it counts, that we are wondering what decisions we should make and where we should go and who we should be with and what choices that are before us and what things we need to walk away from. And one of the important things about these things, that there's some fights you don't need to have, some things you need to let go, and there's some things that you need to embrace. Maybe perhaps the writer of Ecclesiastes offered us these words as well. To everything there is a season, to every purpose under heaven, there is a time, a proper time. A time to give and a time to take, a time to live and a time to die, and so on and so on and so on. Knowing when is important. In other words, knowing when is about timing, and only the one who sent you here, the one who gave you an assignment for life, can let you know what the timing is, when and where. And perhaps you're on the road or on the train of your life, and it took some gambler or some person wise in their own nature to give you some advice. Hold on to your life. Know when with your head, know when with your hands, but most importantly, know when with your hearts. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you for so much for joining us for our morning meditation. We hope that they're an inspiration and an encouragement to you. We want you to know that you are loved, you are appreciated, and indeed, you are irreplaceable. You're the best of the best. Live that way. And yes, it takes you to change the world. Just keep looking to know when. Have a great one.